In today's fast-paced world, where demands are constantly increasing and expectations are higher than ever, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stuck, or unsure about how to reach your full potential. But fear not, this podcast is specifically designed to equip you with the mindset, strategies, and insights needed to excel in every area of your life. Together, we're going to unlock the secrets of high performance and embark on a transformational journey towards living our best life. Let's dive in. Welcome to the High Performers Podcast.
Alex, it's a sheer pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm looking forward to our dialogue this morning.
So am I. Now, we met at the 400, which is an event in Fort Worth. And do you know some of the details on it?
Yes, I do. I actually attended last year's ceremony where Miss Opal was selected as Fort Worth's Person of the Year. So that was an utter privilege to be a part of. And then again, just to see Coach Sonny Dykes receiving that award this year, being a TCU alum myself, that was a huge, huge honor.
I loved it. And we were so happy that we met you there and got to connect. So let's start with the first question I'd like to ask everybody. What do you tell people when they ask you, what do you do for a living?
I proudly tell them that I'm a practicing artist and that I also teach the field at the secondary level at Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD at Boswell High School.
Very good. And now, of course, there's quite a bit more than just what you do for a living. Let's talk about some of the bigger activities that you have. Now, this is the High Performers Podcast. So we always like to talk about, all of the parts of high performance as far as your habits and mentalities and how you made it along this journey of yours. So let's talk about being an artist. You're a professional artist.
Yes, I am. I'm actually the only practicing Sri Lankan American artist in DFW. And by practicing, just so we can set the tone for this discussion, is one that not only has an active studio practice, is also engaged in the business aspects of selling, exhibiting their work. And as everyone knows, when it comes to the artist, not only are you the creator, but you're also your own publicist, you're your own installer, you're your own de-installer. And then there are just so many facets to being an artist that it's no surprise that when it comes to the Fort Worth art community as a whole, compared to our neighbors in Houston and Austin and even Dallas, we're slightly short. We slightly fall back, and that's because life takes over, especially if you're a female artist, where you have to juggle full-time obligations, and then there's motherhood. So being a full-time artist, or at least a practicing artist, is not easy, and yet somehow our contemporaries around us seem to be doing a better job at it and have a more vibrant infrastructure. And so when I get into social circles or social events like the one that we met at, this is what I tell them, that my main focus is to bridge that gap between being a practicing artist and an educator. And that gap, that main ingredient, are the youth. One of the things that I first like to start off with is, in discussions like this, is point out that there are artists that are 10 times better than I am at what I do. And then there are educators that are 10 times better at what I do. But there's no one that corrals the youth and gets them engaged and gets them inspired to look at the entrepreneurial aspects of being an artist. And not only that, but being an artist in Fort Worth. So there are programs that I have designed myself, and I'm glad to say that I do have collegiate partners that have shared my vision, and we have a lot of success stories that I can share with you. But that is basically the gist of it, to get the art community here to look a little younger, to be a little bit more vibrant, as opposed to being gregarious and cliquish and somewhat complacent. Something my parents taught me a while back was complacency is corrosive. And just because you're settled doesn't mean you are established, so to speak.
Wow, you left me with one to think on there for a second. So how did you get past this mentality of like the broke artist or the suffering artist? How did you get past that personally in your mind?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I tell my students that there are no victims in this classroom. This is America. And the great thing about America is there are so many opportunities that you can pursue in a myriad of fields. I am South Asian, came to this country on an F1 visa, just like any other international student. But what makes my story unique as a South Asian is that, and I always pay homage to my parents, the fact that they took a cultural and financial risk in sending their offspring 8,000 miles away to learn how to hold a paintbrush and a pencil. The higher education level is unheard of. And I was a freshman at 17, pursuing a BFA at TCU. I earned my bachelor's at 21. Then I went on to earn my master's at 23 from Pratt Institute in New York. So when I talk to my students about my success story, I let them know that as a foreigner, there are so many obstacles that I had to encounter. Thankfully, language wasn't one of them. English is my first language, so there weren't any linguistic barriers. But there were so many other, simple things like finding transportation, finding a job. In order to find a job, you need a social security card. In order to get a social security card, you have to find transportation to head downtown Fort Worth to go and get one. But my students, I would say 99% of them are US-born citizens. And it is sad but true to say that a lot of them just don't realize how fortunate and privileged they are to have access to the amount of resources that they do at the public school level. Even the most impoverished student, Alex, can still get access to a free laptop. And those that fall way below poverty line can still get access to a portable Wi-Fi device that they can take home with them in case their infrastructure cannot support, the proper bandwidth facilities. So it is that type of a cultural experience that I impart onto them, and I let them know that here you are being taught by a person who has received a grant from the Bass family during the height of the pandemic. Here's a person that has a piece of artwork in the TCU Library's permanent art collection. Here you are being taught by a person that's a two-time visiting artist at the Kimball. Here you are being taught by a person that has had the privilege of working at the United Nations. If you have a passion for something, pursue it and hone your skill set, have a growth mindset, and you can gain success in something as organic and hands-on as art. I never talk about the starving artist perspective because that is the type of nonsense mentality that actually fuels that complacent, defeatist attitude. So that is how I dispel that notion.
Yeah, and we see that exact same thing in the entrepreneurial side. A lot of people are like, man, a guy tried it and it didn't work. And I took this class and I still didn't know what I did, and I wound up losing that money. And so there's a lot of those things that I work with just anybody I work with in coaching to start taking that out. It sounds like you do that a lot with these students.
Yes. And I have to mention that, being in the education industry, money plays a huge factor, especially at the public school level. So there are instances where I have had to teach a demographic of students, Alex, that sadly enough could not afford 6 measly drawing pencils. If you cannot afford drawing pencils, it's going to be tough learning in my class, right? Because I have exceedingly high expectations. But you wouldn't want anything less from someone that's practicing it on a professional level. So why in the world would I dumb it down? So I've had that experience where I've taught at a tier 1 school where I have taught economically disadvantaged students. I've also been in a unique situation where I am teaching another set of demographics where first thing in the morning, what overwhelms them is having to choose between 6 different iced coffee flavored drinks before their morning starts. So it is a lovely dichotomy for me to have to experience as an educator. But there's one thing that hasn't changed from my end. I don't teach the students, Alex, I teach the subject. And with that mentality, I don't compromise on my principles and I do not compromise on the integrity of the subject. And in the end, I'm doing my students a service because they are learning how to become well-rounded individuals. Whether they like the subject or not, they're learning to be well-rounded individuals so that people like you can receive well-rounded candidates that have perfect balance between hard skills and soft skills. And for me, it's always been about the resume. Telling the students, put it on your resume. You got selected for the district art show, put that on your resume so that, again, people like you, leaders in our community, can see that this candidate has creative intuition.
And that creative part is humongous. We just had a humongous a long talk this morning with my business partner, myself, and we came up with a creative solution for one of our issues. And we started to realize we're like, it's not because we're so smart, or we're not really that smart, but we were able to be creative and come up with a solution. So let's talk. I want to hear you talk about teaching the students to turn art into a profession and become professional and stay professional at it. So that means money, that means making a living at it. So can you give us maybe some skills that they need to start working on, or skills that you help them work on?
So the program that identifies this early exposure that you've alluded to is NAMNO. That is my program. That is an acronym for New Age Media, New Age Learning. And NAMNO is sponsored by the 21st Century Grant, which is funded by the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD Education Foundation. It is foundations like these, Alex, that are invaluable to any school district. So not only do foundations like this generously give toward student scholarships, but they also award scholarships for educators to pursue and better their fields, respectively. The 21st Century Grant is unique in that you can only apply for that grant if you incorporate a technological component to the program or to the proposal. NAMNOL aims to take a select group of secondary school students. These are predominantly AP students and advanced art students. So for instance, I teach AP drawing, advanced art 3, art 2, art 2. So we take a select group of students, and last year, that was the pilot year, where we thrust them into the new media program taught by Professor Nick Bontrager at Texas Christian University. The whole point of this program is to take me out of the equation and to expose the students to a collegiate rigor that is taught from a refreshing point of view. So the instructional style is delivered by someone completely different. The instructional material is completely different. What they produce in that studio, Alex, it's a one-day workshop, in case you were wondering. So what they produce in that one day is going to be uniquely different from what they would learn in my classroom. I teach traditional drawing techniques. The goal of the program is to expose them to non-traditional techniques. And there's a triumvirate component to this program. The first one is whatever they learn from the new media class taught by Professor Nick Bontrager is to incorporate their learning and repurpose it for their academic coursework. In this case, it would be their AP portfolios. The second goal is to take their learnings and repurpose it for state competitions, which would be the UIL Visual Arts Scholastic event that we compete in. And then the third one is the community aspect, where they take their learnings and repurpose it and transmit it through a mural, which was successfully completed on campus at Boswell High School. So the first year, I cannot overstate how incredibly successful and fruitful it was for all parties concerned, at the collegiate level, at the secondary level, campus level, district level. All stakeholders benefited, but the winners were the students, especially the ones that painted the mural for alongside with me, Alex. I cannot stress to you how invaluable it is for a student to be able to paint a mural, not at ground level, but on a scissor lift, ascending and painting on a massive scale. That is the true epitome of a mural, right? That is the pinnacle. You get on that scissor lift, you go up and down, side to side, and just paint on a grand scale. You don't have to wait 4 years to get a taste of that. You don't have to wait 4 years to discover elective courses at any university. Do it at secondary. Show the students that they can meet professionals that do this for a living, and make those connections. And then hopefully that experience will strengthen their passion. And then again, we can have those students, that youth, reinvest into Fort Worth as creative entrepreneurs or as creatives. I really don't mind if they don't become artists in the end. It's just about that entrepreneurial mindset, right? Just to be able to think creatively and to be able to implement practically.
That's exactly the important part, is being able to implement it. So I don't know if you know this, I was a professional singer for many years, and that means I did all of my training through high school, and all of the music that I learned and all of the music theory and the way that music is set up set me up for a lot of what I use now, going through spreadsheets and numbers. You know, a lot of music is counting and it's math in your brain. And so numbers become very easy to me. And so, can you talk about, that's how it kind of translated for me from being creative and being a singer over into business that I'm in now? Can you talk about how this affects the students? How does it affect their mindset and their growth?
I will not take credit away from my students' hard work, but I will say this with boastful pride that by going through the NAMNOL program alongside TCU, and I cannot overstate how grateful I am for the School of the Fine Arts at TCU for facilitating this workshop. But because of their participation, 13% of that 15 student cohort ended up qualifying for state at base. So what that means is that they successfully ranked at regionals, and they ended up traveling to San Marcos, where they competed with practically the whole of Texas, and got to showcase their artwork. Unfortunately, we didn't medal at state, but that's not the point. The point is they have a new resume entry. Out of that 13%, one student, her name is Parker Heiner. She happened to become the second Boswell High School student to win the Mayor Matty Parker High School competition, which was hosted by Fort Works Art Gallery. And what makes this an exceptional award is that not only is Parker just a sophomore, Alex, but she was part of that TCU workshop, and she again gets to put this on her resume. Those numbers and that type of exposure is something that needs to be nurtured, something that needs to be challenged. And I have made it very clear to students like Parker that you cannot be complacent. You now have to evolve. You now have to exceed your own expectations, because now people like me will have high expectations, and more importantly, the community is going to be watching you now. So again, this all comes back to the education foundation of Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. Without their support, something like this could not have come to fruition. I need to point out that the foundation alone has, or should I put it this way, the arts department at Boswell High School has earned over $28,000 in grant funding from the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD Education Foundation. So we have people in our program, including myself, that are practicing artists. Two of them, including myself, have won the grant more than once. So what that shows is that the foundation and Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD as a district, Alex, places a huge value on STEAM principles, right? Science, technology, engineering, art, mathematics. This is a very important acronym, and the students don't, at least in my class, they don't have to understand that, but they're getting to experience it. So by the time they become seniors or end up in the hot seat with you, yeah, they'll exude that confidence. They'll exude that creativity.
Oh, that creativity, we keep coming back to it. It is so important. Let's go back and talk about your creativity, your personal artwork, because you showed me some and it's beautiful and amazing. And you have, from what I understand, there's been about 4 or 5 different styles that you've gone through that you're, can you talk about that, about like the different projects and the different styles that you've used? They're really amazing.
Thank you. Yes, as artists, you have to go through um, either intermittent or prolonged stages of evolution. I started off primarily as an oil painter, and I hate cliches. So I dabbled with experimenting and seeing how oil and water come together, right? If it's even possible, because as we all know, oil and water don't mix. So taking acrylic and oil and conjuring up compositions out of that. I added a third ingredient, which is resin. So now using a substance which needs to be applied so thinly on typically furniture is being superfluously and grossly applied on the canvas. And it just creates these lovely clashes of, I don't know how to describe it, but you're basically seeing water and oil engaging in combat, and then the remnants are left on the canvas. So my paintings are primarily psychedelic. They're extremely reflective and super fluid, right? Intense movement. But I'm using figuration as my primary subject matter. It's not about the figures, so to speak. It's more of taking traditional Ceylonese art, taking traditional Sri Lankan art, which revolved around figures, and abstracting those. So I'm now focusing, I'm deconstructing the figure, the human body, to just lines and brushstrokes, right? Color forms, color palettes. When the pandemic uh, occurred, I tell people, of course, we all remember we were locked down and there was no access to basic goods, in this case, basic luxury goods such as canvases and paints. So I simply, at the time, I wouldn't call it a growth mindset because I guess I didn't have that entrepreneurial mentality, but simple. I just told myself, right, I need to create, let me adapt, got some really crappy paper, a pen, and started stippling. So I have begun this huge series of hyperrealistic pointillism drawings. And it's a 19-part series, and the 19 stems from COVID-19. So the samples that I showed you were a peacock, a lion, 3 monkeys. So these works, this body of work is ongoing, and it's just a great technique in experimenting with light and value and negative space plus positive space. And I title all my works by the number of hours it takes me to render them because it seems apt. At the time that I started my Pointillism series, it was all, we had nothing but time. And so it forces you as the viewer to appreciate the process. I'm not trying to make any particular commentary on time or the pandemic. It's just more of me focusing on the process. But my paintings was all about the procedure, right? The studio practice. Here with the drawing, it's about the practice, the process. As I told you, I hate cliches. So I will never title my works as peacock or lion or hippopotamus, but rather 117 hours or 62 hours or 72 hours. The longest time I've spent on a piece took me 151 hours. My personal goal is to break the 200-hour barrier. So there's a little trivia for you.
And go back and explain exactly what pointillism is so that they can understand the time.
Pointillism is a technique which was pioneered by Georges Seurat. He was a French painter that dabbled with dots, and he's well known for just painting and using an empirical method of placing dots and colors meticulously and scientifically to create an overall visual effect. What I'm doing, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can do. But the fact that these are super hyper realistic, the technique is called stippling, and all it is just this motion where I am just placing hundreds, thousands of dots side by side, creating different areas of contrast and different areas of values to create either something that is representational or abstract. For the most part, I am working on Sri Lankan wildlife. However, I'm working on 2 commissions right now that have forced me to deviate from that. And so that is perfectly fine. I would consider these 2 commissioned pieces to be part of my series because it just highlights my journey as an artist. It highlights the never-ending timeline of evolving as an artist. So the best thing to any social circle or social dialogue is a story. So to go from Sri Lankan wildlife to something that just deviates from that makes any conversation a lot richer.
Can you talk about what it means to you to set a goal for a project for this series? You have this series of 19 pieces you're working on now. And so what does that mean to you to start that goal, be in the middle of it? Talk about the emotions as you go through it and how you handle those and also the mentalities to keep going and to stay on to one subject, you know? Talk about all that.
There are 3 ingredients that you need to execute a pointillism drawing. At least in my case, they are passion, patience, and a pen. So I work predominantly in ink, exclusively in ink, and I don't go through any emotions. It is a zone that any true artist will attest to. Once you are in that zone, you really don't think of anything. And I can confidently and proudly say that a lot of my inspiration is not manufactured, meaning I do not indulge in recreational substances to to foster inspiration. I will utilize a visual reference, and then from that I will appropriate and create my own composition out of that. What really gets me excited is how I appropriate these images. So I don't need to necessarily render the entire image for you to discern, as you've seen with my lion piece entitled 39 Hours. With that piece, I left out, or rather omitted, the lion's mane. And so the whole point is addition through subtraction. I don't need to render everything for you as a viewer to discern what it is. So that's me trying to bring in some of my abstract painterly mindset into these highly representational drawings. That's the fun part, right? Trying to manipulate the composition in that manner without just it. The technique seems tedious, but the process is exciting, and I make it so because I don't sketch. I cannot sketch. I cannot force myself to be contrived in that manner. And so that's what I guess intrinsically keeps me going throughout this process. And just to clarify, I never spend 117 consecutive hours on a piece. It'll take me a few months. But the key, Alex, and this comes back to education, is I get to work on my stuff in front of the students. the students get to see a professional artist who happens to be their art educator working just as they should be. And I've been in a blessed situation where the first 6, 7 years of my teaching career, I've always had a show, whether it be a solo show or a group show. And you know what I afford my students, Alex? I afford them extra credit opportunities to attend every single show that I'm in. The extra credit is generous, but it is so because when my students do show up, the ones that have, they've proven to me that they're willing to step out of their little zip code and travel somewhere different, hear something different, see something different, experience something different. That different that I'm talking about, Alex, is an art gallery, right? Where they're going to hear a different style of talking. They're going to see a different style of socializing. And of course, it's an art gallery, so they're going to be visually stimulated by an array of artworks. And what will catch their eye is, I know that piece. That's my art teacher's artwork. And I've seen him produce that from start to finish. That is a concept that I've talked about quite passionately, where I make that semantic distinction between an art teacher and an art educator. So for a person like you, Alex, the difference to me is an art teacher teaches the students, where in essence they're limited by a lesson plan and a t-test evaluation conducted by the administrators. An art educator, or should I say an educator, teaches the subject, teaches the nuances. And in order to do that, that person is actively writing books. That person is actively running a business, or that person is actively producing a body of work or creating works that he or she is selling via their website. That is the difference between an art teacher and an art educator. And I unabashedly work on my professional works in the classroom in front of my students every single day. And that is how every art classroom should conduct itself.
That's really neat. I like that. Can you talk about where people can get in touch with you? Because you have a few different projects. Let people know where they can get in touch with you about that.
I have my website, and which is www.djperera.com. My Instagram handle is djperera22. And as I mentioned, I proudly teach at Boswell High School at Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. The other project that you just alluded to is a mentor organization called Boz Gentlemen. And this was a endeavor that I was charged with by my administrators, and I'm thankful for them because they entrusted me with something that could have easily flopped. So the whole point of Boz Gentlemen is to edify male secondary students in the 4 C's. The 4 C's are courtesy, civility, charity, and community. They have to fulfill a criterion of expectations in how to respect the opposite sex, how to respect their elders, how to respect themselves, decorum, etiquette, and essential skill sets like how to shake hands, how to look a person in the eye, mannerisms. Once they complete these expectations, by the way, the organization is limited to juniors and seniors. Once they meet these expectations, which includes attending several weeks of entrepreneurial seminars, which have been profoundly successful. I've had directors, I've had vice presidents, I've had entrepreneurs come and talk to these boys about how the real world functions, the essence of education, what are the do's and don'ts of resumes, how to act professionally, how to think about financial literacy. Once they attend and participate in these acts, the seniors get a tailored made suit paid for. The seniors and juniors receive an upscale dinner, and it is those rewards that will enable them to implement, right? We use that word practicality. It'll enable them to implement all their teachings and put them into practice in a real world setting. I want to say thank you to Men's Warehouse and Capital Grille of Fort Worth for partnering and facilitating these the essential components for this program, because Alex, those boys transformed into young men who are well-rounded. We had thespians in the group. We had American football players in the group. We had artists in the group. We had avid students in the group. These were juniors and seniors that were committed to excelling themselves, bettering themselves, and every speaker will attest to that when they came and spoke to these boys. And in the end, they deserved everything that they got. And thank you to the donors, that the community donors in the Saginaw area that just generously bestowed upon these boys and enabled this first year to just go phenomenally well. It will grow next year.
That's exciting. DJ, you're doing some very exciting and really helpful things for community. You know, this is one of the things that we connected about that night whenever we met. And I remember you were telling me about this mentor program. And I don't remember if I shared with you my personal mission and what we do. You know, we have this investments that we do, and it's RV parks, and you know, that's great. We make people money, and it's wonderful. But there's a deeper side to it. And so recently, it's been about maybe 6 months ago, I really kind of looked deeper and refocused and said, well, my personal mission and what we're doing here, my personal mission is to empower 1 million fathers to connect more deeply with their children through the power of outdoor campground family experiences. And so I really appreciate what you're doing. And, you know, while we're out here and we have a voice and people are listening to us, I encourage other men to get involved with any kind of programs like this. We don't have much, Boy Scouts, not a lot, Cub Scouts, whatever, a lot of older programs. They can be replaced, they can be started, they can be democratized and spread out little small groups of people helping out, you know. But anyway, I really appreciate what you're doing in that. So one final question I have for everybody, and I'll let you kind of wrap it up, is what we're going to do is imagine that right now, this is the last time that anybody ever gets to hear from DJ. This is your last message out to the world, but this podcast is going out and everyone in the world is going to hear it. So, DJ Perera, what is your message to the world?
Relaxing is rusting. Do something.
All right, do something. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. From me, Alex Alexander, and the High Performers Podcast, I'm saying go out there and stay high performing.